BC15's Navita Fergani spoke with a former CPS worker who says some caseworkers just aren't doing their job.
That's right, Steve and Katie. This caseworker actually worked for Arizona CPS, but quit because she was so frustrated with the system. And in my exclusive interview with her, she goes into great detail about how some caseworkers use shortcuts and others abused power during their investigation. We've also uncovered court paperwork supporting the claims of some parents who say caseworkers abuse their power. We found court documents of an open case where a judge goes on the record claiming a caseworker made up her mind to take away the children because she didn't like that the parents didn't react quickly enough during the initial visit. He accuses the caseworker of, quote, getting ticked off, unquote, and the judge believes that's why the children were taken away. And this former CPS employee tells me that's not an isolated incident.
Yo, my people, thank you for tuning in to Words from the Greats podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Cully, and today we're going to be talking about social services and men, aka dads. So first, what is the role of a social worker? A social worker has three main roles. That's to protect, safeguard, and support families. Now obviously they have the same three roles for adults, but today we're just going to be talking about the family side of things. So to protect, safeguard and support families is the role of a social worker. So a question for all you viewers. Do you believe that social services are fair when it comes to families? I'll give my answer what I think at the end. So my views on social services come a lot from my experience with social services. Like as I told you in my intro, if you've seen the video. I was raised in care. Well, I was raised with my mum initially, but then I was living with my dad, but my dad couldn't look after me. I was misbehaved, so I ended up being raised in care. I think it's from the age of 11 onwards I was in care. But my care experience was nice, but that's not what we're here for. We're here for social services. So my experience with social workers. So when I first got into the care system, I remember I was a place called Laxton House in Peterborough in the United Kingdom. There's a social services building that they used to own. I remember basically why they were trying to sort me out a placement to live. That every day for about 4 days in a row. It was a long 4 days, that's why I remember it. I'd basically sit from 9 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the social services building waiting for them to find me a placement to live. Now eventually, every night they'd give me a temporary placement and I'd go to this temporary placement with a random family that I didn't know. Yeah, so as I'm waiting in this building, twiddling my thumbs thinking what's going on with my life. So this is my first experience with social services. I was just left in a room. There was a couple of books in there and some very childish toys. I remember I was like 11, 12. There was some very baby toys there. Nothing for me to do basically. So I'd spent my days in there, then eventually got put into a foster placement. Actually, one of my brother's teachers. One of my brother's teachers I ended up living with. And not here to talk about care. I've already said I loved the care experience. To me it was a whole new life experience. It made me who I am today. But the social workers' involvement is... Even as a kid, so I'm talking as a kid first, I'll get into the dad bit, but as a kid, the social workers just, honestly, they're there to tick their boxes for their job. It's like any other job. You know, you go to work, you got 9 to 5, don't matter what job you do, if you've got a 9 to 5 job, you're in there 9 o'clock, at 5 o'clock you want to go home. There's no in between, you don't really care about your job when you're at home. Well, social work is no different. Social work, most social workers do not care once they go home about the kid, about the families or anything. It's just their job to them. This is what you've got to remember. They might say different, but it is just a job that pays very well. So that's why they're social workers. So yeah, if you establish that they are just people in a job, I suppose you can look at it a lot different. But they're not meant to be just people in a job. They're meant to be people in a job who are meant to care about their job and care about the families and that they work with. But skipping ahead out of the care system, because let's face it, they were all just ticking boxes. All the social workers I had while I was in the care system were just ticking boxes. It wasn't until I went to leave the care system that I came across a good social worker. I won't say her name, but she was from Peterborough as well. She's the only good social worker, I can honestly say, hand on heart, the only good social worker I ever had. And you know why? It's because I was in a placement up in Telford And with as a naughty kid, like 14, 15, 16, I'm doing like all-nighters, doing just naughty stuff like you know, bad kids do. So we're staying out all night. She's the only social worker I ever had call me at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning because my care home that I was in reported me missing, and she's calling me to make sure I was okay. And but you know, I've only ever had one social worker who truly showed they care. You know, like your mum would care, like would call you at 1:30, where are you? Why ain't you home? They'd probably be giving you an earful as well, but she was. But this is what I mean. That's how you know they care. So I can honestly say, in care, I had one social worker who actually cared about me, who actually wanted the best and to make sure everything was there to safeguard me, to protect me, and to support me. So, hands up, I had had one good social worker when I was in care. Now, since leaving care, and as a father, you get a whole new experience with social services. So, obviously, I went through a custody battle. I did end up winning custody of my son, but along the way, I've never had so much stick from such professionals in my life. And just because they raised me, or they helped raise, they didn't raise me, my care workers raised me, but because they put me in the placements that did raise me, and basically I was under their care, is they thought they knew me. They didn't know me at all. As a man, going on to subject as a man, as a dad, as a man and as a dad, social services straight away disregard you. If you are not the mum, they don't want to hear anything you've got to say, unless the concerns have just been directly about the mum, then maybe they'll come to you. But from my experience, is I was social services first got involved with my son because I was a looked after child, and as I looked after child, they have a policy. As a looked after child, if you have a child, that they then have to, for some bizarre reason, I don't know why, it makes absolutely no sense, and it's kind of discriminatory. But they have to assess you if you was looked after in care. They have to assess you if you have a child to see if you're fit to have, you know, to be a parent. And obviously passed the initial assessment, but unbeknown to me, I was with a narcissistic, abusive partner at the time who, on our first breakup, called up the social worker, spouted a load of lies, saying I was domestically abusive, this, that and the other, basically because she found out I was talking to one of my exes at the time. Just friendly, but that's basically what it was. That's all it takes. And then, she ended up speaking to the social worker behind my back. She was missing her pregnancy appointments anyway, with a doctor, midwife, whatever they are. Simply off her own back. I had nothing to do. I didn't even know when half her appointments were because I didn't know it was being kept secret from me at the time. But so she was missing them. But when she'd get a phone call, she'd explain that I'd told her not to go to these appointments, blah blah blah. You know, coming out with such absolute rubbish. Why would anyone say that? Not to go to an appointment about your child that's being born. But yeah, so that's the stuff. She was missing appointments, blaming it on me, and telling social services basically it was my fault and I was abusive. They never spoke to me. Now, bearing in mind, I was the child in care. I was the one they were meant to do the assessment on, but they never spoke to me when they were doing the assessment. They only spoke to my partner at the time. Now, that's all well. It's not all well, because if they're doing an assessment on me because I was looked after, why was I not assessed and spoken to myself to see my capabilities and my views? That it didn't happen. They spoke to her only, and why they were doing that, you know, it just opens the door for an abusive partner to get their piece in before you even know what's going on. So I didn't know I was being attacked while I was still with her. I was still with her at the time and I was being attacked behind my back. She was saying I was abusive, I was, you know, taking drugs, I was forcing her not to go to appointments, all absolute rubbish. But the social worker, instead of at all talking to me, the social worker took it as fact, wrote all that down on their pieces of paper, which gives them the right to then the whole department to not speak to you as the father, because they've then labelled you. Well, he was like this in care. I'd never hit a woman in care. I used to beat up my mates or beat up people who I'd see hit a woman, even if it was by accident. So we all know that was another one I chucked out in court. If they actually looked into the research, they could find out I'd never touched a woman in my bloody life. I'd beat up people for hitting women, even if it was by accident. So that's another way I managed to back that up. But yeah, basically I was seen as the abuser by social services all the way because she was saying these things. I didn't know she was saying them. And I'm just then getting frustrated, going to social, why are you not talking to me? Why are you not talking to me? Then they're saying you're being abusive with them. Not being abusive, I'm just questioning why you're not talking to me. I'm getting frustrated that you're coming in, being involved with my family, but you're not talking to me, the father. You know, I don't know why. She ended up basically sidetracking them because they didn't really do anything too deep. But I think she made out she'd had it in control or something. And it weren't until obviously loads went on. Obviously, the police were called to quite a few incidents. I'm not going to lie, but I was never aggressive or it was just, yeah. When you have a toxic partner, it's very easy for situations to get out of hand, and yeah. So that's basically what happened there. And she had a social worker come out. Funnily enough, one that dealt with me when I was a kid. And this one came out and she was in the middle of an assessment, and I just walked in the door randomly. I didn't know the social worker was there. And the social worker looked gobsmacked when she saw me because I'd walked in the door, and you know them when you walk in on someone and they look shifty, like they've been talking about you. That's basically what I walked into. And this social worker spouted a load of lies about my dad, which is another reason my dad had ended up being social service in court when I was younger. But yeah, I had the same social worker sat there with my abusive partner. I didn't know what they were doing. I didn't even question it actually. I just walked past, said hello, gave a smile, and did what I did. Because unbeknown to me, I didn't know what was going on. But this comes back to my point. Social services, they don't, as a man, they don't want to talk to you. They don't want to hear what you've got to say. As a dad, they don't want to talk to you. They don't want to hear what you've got to say. They don't want to hear your views. They don't want to hear your concerns or anything. They don't want to promote you. They don't want to support you. But if a mother goes to them and spouts out a load of lies, or not even a load of lies, just manipulates and twists stuff as well, that's all it takes, is the social worker will then totally side with the mum, deem you as a bad person, whether you've been in care or not, because I'm sure even if I weren't in care, they'd have just gone with her word, because it's the same thing. So they'll deem you as a bad person, and they'll basically sidetrack you on your child's life. Is that right? Are they allowed to sidetrack people on? No. I've got just as much right as the mum has to be a part of my life and to know what you're saying and writing down on your system about my child, about me and my family. Because it weren't only me she was lying about. She was lying about my dad. She was lying about. It seemed basically it was a little golden gift for social services against my family that I'd managed to get with an abusive partner who was happy to lie through the teeth about absolutely everyone in my family. So maybe they saw it as a little chance to get a comeback at my dad as well, but it didn't work. So really my view is social services are biased, they're sexist, they're very discriminatory, and they don't do their job, which is, again, to protect, support and safeguard families and children. Now, there is no protecting and supporting a dad. You are not getting protected and supported by a social worker ever if you are a dad, unless the mum has, I don't know, maybe attacked a social worker and that social worker takes a grudge against the mum. That's probably the only chance you're going to have, really. As a dad, they won't talk to you, they won't take your views on board, they won't get any input whatsoever from you to put on the system. As a dad, if there has been any allegations made against you, they don't need proof, they don't want proof. They're happy to write that, take it down as fact and deal with it later. Because if they write it down as fact there and then, this is the thing with a social worker, they can write someone malicious that says about you as a fact. If you're a man, they will write it as a fact. So say like your ex-partner says, he's abusive, he wouldn't let me spend my money, he had full control of my money, so just an example. The social worker on that piece of paper would probably turn around and write that they're abusive, they don't give the mum access to any money whatsoever for any needs for the child. They'll exaggerate it and write it down like it's a fact. Whether they've looked into it or not, they've took her word and they'll write it down as a fact. And then the thing is, as a dad, you'll think, well, your paperwork don't mean nothing. They don't mean nothing there and then, because I remember thinking that several times about several stuff that had been said. I thought, you know what, it's a lie, it don't matter, I don't care what you think. It's all good till you get in a courtroom, and then they try dragging out all this old paperwork that they've written as fact that wasn't a fact. It was just hearsay, and one person making an allegation just to make themselves not look as bad, but from what they're doing, basically. So yeah, they write it down as a fact, and then when you're in court, it gets put in front of a judge, and they'll say, well, we've got all this history about this facts, this is what he was doing to her at the time, and this is why he shouldn't be allowed around that child. Excuse me. That's what will happen. Excuse me. None of that ever happened. None of that is ever a fact. But then you're already in the courtroom, so then you've got to argue against it and manage. You ain't got to prove that they're lies. You've got to prove that you're not like that. That's all you can do. You can't prove they're like. I says my neighbours smacked me in the face. I'll walk home, call the police, tell them my neighbours smacked me in the face. I do that. I've got a red mark on my face. By the time the police officer comes around, look, they smack me in the face. Now, if there's no witnesses and no one, either way, what they're going to do? The police won't do anything because they'll need facts, they'll need proof, they'll need some witnesses. Social services don't need any of that. They'll write it down. Thank you very much. You said that. We'll take it as fact and we'll chuck that out at him later and make him have to argue that. So, I feel like that's what they do. They chuck so much at you as a dad, as a man, because as men we're meant to deal with stuff, aren't we? Therefore, if you lose it because you're stressed about 80 lies that are built on top of each other, so you're getting pissed off, you're just fucking fuming, mate. You're like, I get pissed off with these lies, so you start raising your voice, start shouting at people because no one's fucking listening, they're all listening to the lies. So as a man, you get frustrated, you get angry, and you think, it's just like fucking listening to me instead of listening to all the shit they're chatting. But no, it comes across the power of talking again. Unless you know how to talk properly, you're aggressive. If you're saying stuff like that and you're not doing it properly and professionally, you're aggressive. And they'll push you to the point where you have to shout to be heard, and then they'll say, oh look, he's being aggressive. That's literally how a social worker will work with a man. Now with a female, say a man says, I did it, from my own experience, told them stuff that was actually happening, right? And they'll write it down and they'll go, oh, let's say like Mr. Cully has alleged that the other party, has done this and this. There is no proof to back it. This is how they're all writers of it. So Mr. Cully has alleged, but there is no proof to back it up whatsoever. There is no, so there's no, they're not substantiated allegations is what they would put that down on a piece of paper down. They'll say they've done an investigation. It's not a substantiated allegation. There's no proof, no nothing to it. Therefore, it can't be used, and they're not taking no further action. That's what would happen if you said something about the mum. That's simply what they do. There's no further action because you can't prove it. We're saying it as he's being malicious, but they won't do that the other way. They will take the first one. So basically, I know it sounds bad, but it's like the first person to get their allegation in is the one that's got the stepping stone with a social worker. Unless you're a mum, I'm sure you get the first allegation and the mum will come up with 6 more, which would then put you down at the bottom of the list again, and So, do I think social services are fair myself? No, I don't, because my own experiences as a child, they ain't fair on the children. They don't care. Like most of them say, it's just a job. It's like you go into your Tesco's warehouse, you go into IKEA warehouse. It's like a pilot getting on an airplane, flying his plane. He's going from one destination to another, then he knows damn well after that he's going home and he's not thinking about work anymore. That's literally what it's like when you're in care. As a dad, so as a kid, no they don't. As a dad, no they don't. Even more so, they don't even care what you say. So as a dad, you're shunned aside. They discriminate against dad. They're very sexist against dad. They're biased against dads. From my experiences, not just mine, my dad's as well. So 2 generations of experiences when we're saying the same thing. So yeah, really, I do not believe social services are fair. I don't believe they have the best interest of the families. They're there to destroy families, to make sure mums and women have more power over their children, because at the end of the day, mums are easier to get to do what they want them to do. They will follow the mainstream agenda. If a dad believes something's not right, is much more likely to dig his heels in and fight it, like I did. And I won. As a dad, if you fight, you will win. As a mum, if they get pushed a little bit. Not all mums, I'm saying there's some very strong-willed mums out there, but they're the ones that social services don't like. So really, what it comes down to is social services will work with you, they'll support you as long as you're doing the mainstream, what they want the mainstream people to be doing, basically. If you're a working class slave, someone who's happy to do as you're told, someone who's happy to raise your kids how you're told to raise your kids. You're not allowed to think how to raise your kids. You have to be happy to raise your kids the way you are being told to raise your kids. If not, they'll try and take your kids away. If not, they'll try and stop you having any access to your children. It comes down, if you look into it, probably a deeper state control. But that's a whole nother episode if you want to go into state control. Social services are not fit for the job. They do not do what they're there to do. They should, honestly, I think the whole system needs rewriting, and someone needs to break it down with them. Someone needs to break it down with them and say, no more for me. So yeah, someone needs to break it down, the whole system down, say, this don't work, this don't work, this don't work, this needs re-looking at. The whole policy, I'm sure if you actually look into their policy behind the doors, they've got a different policy where they say can ignore the dads and listen to the mums. But I truly believe to be a social worker, to be a good social worker, you've got to care for your job. You've got to have an inside knowledge, not just of families, but of people. You've got to understand that there are toxic people, there are vindictive people, there are, and if someone's shouting as a social worker, if someone's shouting at me as a social worker, then it depends on the way they're shouting, I get that, but if someone's shouting and you can tell by the way they're shouting that it's because they ain't being listened to, as a social worker you need to realise you need to realise the emotion behind people on the way they're expressing it, be able to read people. If you can't read people, you shouldn't be a social worker. I know so many social workers that cannot read people, so they shouldn't be a social worker, because if you're talking to a mum who's lying to you as a social worker and you're taking it all as word, you're not doing the best interest for that kid at all, for the children, for the family. You're doing the best thing to stick by women power, if that's what it is. I'm not saying it is, but that's what they're doing. It's just ridiculous. As a social worker, you need to really care, have an inside knowledge, be able to read people, and you have to be able to be fair, not biased, not have an opinion. You have to do what God says. Don't judge. Only God can judge. Social workers do nothing but judge. They will hear a word about you, they will look at a report from when you was in care, and they will say, oh look, he was a naughty kid, he liked fighting when he was in care, which I did. I was a hard lad, I loved fighting. So they'll see that and they'll go, he's a violent person. And not go deeper into it, go, hang on, what was going on when he was a kid? All of this stuff was going on. He weren't seeing his mum, he wanted to live with his mum. He'd put in new houses 15, 16 times before he managed to fucking stick at one. So they don't look at all that and go, oh, maybe that's why he was like that as a kid. And not later on come in your life and go, oh, he was like this as a kid, he's like that now. Well, no, not at all. It's because when they'd seen me, they'd never seen me like that. But as they're seeing me as an adult, they're coming and saying, oh, this is what he was like 12, 13 years ago, this is what he's like now. Not at all. People change. Do they not get that? People change. People show expression, express emotions. I express emotion like no tomorrow, mate. If you piss me off, I'm a shout. Someone pisses me off, I'm shouting. If I feel like you're not listening, I'm shouting until you will listen. And I get that's not the best way to make people listen, but if they ain't listening anyway, it's a way to make them realise you're in the bloody room. And once they realise you've got a big presence like that, they have to listen. Believe me. I shouted at a couple of judges in my time as well. Yeah, so really I just want to keep it short and sweet for today. Give my views on social services, what I think. Please leave your comments down below if you've had any experiences with social services or what you believe. Do you agree with my opinion? Are they biased? Are they sexist? Do they favour mums? Or do they not? So yeah, thank you for joining. Words from the greats. Peace out. Till the next one. Goodbye.